In the previous video, Paul discussed some basic ideas about motivation. You can have an influence on your students' motivation as a teacher in front of a classroom, but a proper tone and a constructive classroom atmosphere must be present. If you focus too much on authority, there might be a risk that your students will respect you less or that they will start to dislike the course. On the other hand, if you treat your students too much like they are your friends, you might be at risk that the students will not accept your position as the teacher in front of the classroom as much as you would like. So, how to find a balance between being too strict and being too friendly? In this video, I will talk about how to set the right tone from the very beginning. In the introduction part of the very first session, you will have to introduce yourself, start getting to know your students, establish some ground rules, and, of course, mention what you set out to do, the structure of your first session. First, let's talk about a proper way to introduce yourself. You could share something about your background, your interests, or your motivation to teach. What exactly is up to you. The most important thing to keep in mind is to act authentically. Be yourself. Do not think you have to be someone you aren't with your students. Remember what we discussed in week 1 about professional behavior, authentic leadership, and clear communication? You can be yourself and be professional at the same time. Ultimately, you'd want to show that you're in charge in the classroom, but at the same time, want them to know that you care about, respect, and support them. It is therefore vital to be able to create a safe learning environment for your students, since it will enhance the learning process of your students. Dana will tell you more about that later this week. Secondly, depending on the size of the group, it is a good idea to learn their names and find out a little bit about them. Doing an icebreaker activity with your students can help you with that. And it has the additional advantage that the exercise can help the students to feel more comfortable and to get to know each other in another way than they typically would in a classroom setting. Googling icebreaker will give you a lot of options. A good example for groups of 10 to 15 students is to play bingo with them. You can make up a bingo sheet with different characteristics they may have. Characteristics could be, for example, being a student assistant in a support function at the university or being involved in a sport association. Let the students mingle with each other and find peers who have those characteristics. Determine how many characteristics have to be found, for example, 4, in order to have a bingo. You can choose to participate in the icebreaker exercise or to be an observer. It's up to you. Thirdly, after the introductions, you could start with establishing group norms about conduct in class. What will happen when someone comes in late? And in international groups, what language will be spoken in the classroom? And what about rules for using mobile phones? Establishing rules on classroom policies at the start of the course can help prevent discipline issues later on. Having the group write their own rules, to the extent that this is possible, will help them feel like they're part of a group, as opposed to you having strong control over the students. This is a great way to balance control with warmth. Instead of imposing rules on them, which would be quite authoritarian, the group takes responsibility, which in turn shows them that you respect them. What I do with my groups is to present some sample situations for them. I will tell them that class starts at 1 o'clock, for example, and say that I expect them to be in their seats ready to go at 1. Then I will ask them what the class policy should be when someone comes in late. I will either write everything on the board myself or ask for a volunteer for the group to write down the rules. After class, I will email the students with the list of rules they generated. That way, they all know what they are and understand that they are responsible for sticking to them. By establishing some ground rules and the corresponding consequences, you let the students know what they can expect. Another way to manage the expectations is to be clear about what the structure of each session will look like. In the introduction part of each session, You can briefly address this by mentioning the agenda of the session, which learning activities there will be, and how they relate to the intended learning outcomes of the course, and at what time you expect to have a break. In the next step, we want to hear from you what kind of situations you might find challenging to manage as an instructor. Since everyone has different strengths, not everyone might find the same situation hard to deal with. I'm curious to hear what kind of situations you might find challenging.